a series to fully understand Putin in the war in Ukraine. In the summer of 1975, as a young Vladimir Putin walked proudly out of the gates of Leningrad State University, the dream he had sworn to himself at age 15 on Litinier Avenue No. 4 had finally become a reality. He was no longer the little punk from Baskov Lane who lived by the law of the jungle. Nor was he merely a boy who idolized the heroes in the Soviet film Shield and Sword. At this moment, he was a top law school graduate, a Soviet judo master, and most importantly, a soon-to-be sworn-in agent of the KGB, an agent of the sword. In the eyes of the 23-year-old Putin, the train of his life was on the most glorious and correct track, heading toward a brilliant future of defending his homeland. But this ambitious young man could never have imagined that the sword, to which he would dedicate 16 years of his life, would ultimately fail to cut through the deep-seated rot of the Soviet Union. And the shield he swore to protect would be powerless against the collapse of the Red Empire. The end of Putin's KGB dream would see him personally burying his past and beginning another journey from the ruins of the empire. Picking up where we left off, after Putin visited the KGB office on Litinier Avenue No. 4 at age 15, his life had a clearer goal than ever before. Heeding the advice from the KGB officer to get into the law department of a prestigious university, Putin transformed himself in his last 2 years of high school. With astonishing effort, he closed the gap between himself and the Soviet Union's top academic institutions. At the time, Leningrad State University was on par with Moscow State University as the nation's premier institution of higher learning. Its law department was one of the most popular and difficult to get into. According to Putin's own recollection, the competition was incredibly fierce. The application requirements were extremely strict, and on average, only 1 out of every 40 applicants was accepted. Most of the spots were taken by well-connected students with recommendations from party and government organs. The number of places left for ordinary high school graduates like him was minuscule. While Putin came from a family with a background in the system, in the competition for a spot in the law department, he was effectively the child of an ordinary worker's family. The fact that Putin got in through the standard examination path was a testament to his extraordinary willpower. Once in college, Putin maintained an extremely disciplined life to achieve his dream of joining the KGB. He studied diligently, kept a regular schedule, and dedicated most of his free time to sports and fitness. He not only successfully completed his studies, but also became a master of Sambo in 1973 and a master of Judo in 1975. However, the most profound influence on Putin during his university years was not what he learned, but who he met. A pivotal figure named Anatoly Sobchak. During Putin's time at the university in the 1970s, Sobchak was an associate professor of economic law. In Putin's memory, he was not only a charismatic, open-minded, and eloquent scholar, but also a typical liberal, reformist intellectual within the Soviet academic world at the time. However, the real Sobchak was far more complex than this description. From today's perspective, Sobchak was a classic public intellectual. He not only fiercely criticized the Soviet system, but also championed Western-style democracy, rule of law, market economics, and freedom of speech. In the 70s, Sobchak was still relatively restrained, but by the late 80s and early 90s, he would become a key figure during the period surrounding the collapse of the Soviet Union. The reason he was so critical to Putin was not that Putin's ideology was influenced by him, but that he would later become Putin's most important political mentor. During his university years, Putin was ambivalent about Sobchak's ideas. In 1975, under Sobchak's guidance, he completed his senior thesis, titled The Principle of Most Favored Nation Treatment in International Law. Although Sobchak made no secret of his disdain for power structures like the KGB, for Putin it remained his ultimate dream.
Putin's entry into the KGB was extremely interesting. When he had visited Litany Avenue years earlier, the KGB officer had told him they didn't accept walk-ins. This was not just a rejection, but also a hint. The flip side of the KGB not accepting walk-ins was that they proactively and secretly recruited their own members. In Putin's final year of university, a KGB recruiter initiated secret contact with him. With his impeccable family background, a law degree from a top university, excellent physical condition, and a low-key, reliable performance in school, Putin was judged to be the perfect candidate for the KGB. Upon graduation, he seamlessly joined the organization. After entering the KGB, he was immediately sent to School Number 401 in Okhta, a suburb of Leningrad, for a year of basic training. There, Putin systematically learned the fundamental skills of intelligence work, including surveillance, counter-surveillance, informant recruitment, and other espionage tradecraft. A year later, he was assigned back to the KGB's Leningrad branch, the very building he had walked into at age 15. The realization of a dream is not always perfect. In the KGB's shield and sword emblem, the first chief directorate, responsible for foreign intelligence, represented the offensive sword. The second chief directorate, responsible for counterintelligence, represented the defensive shield.
Although both were equally important, in the young Putin's eyes, the KGB agents carrying out secret missions abroad were the perfect image of what he wanted to be. Despite his disappointment with the assignment, Putin demonstrated exceptional discipline and reliability. He worked diligently in this position for nearly 10 years. In 1984, the 32-year-old Putin finally received the transfer order he had dreamed of. His superiors informed him that he had been selected to go to Moscow for a year of advanced training at the Yuri Andropov Red Banner Institute. This academy's purpose was to cultivate foreign intelligence elites for the KGB. When Putin learned that his training course included German, he immediately knew his next destination. In 1985, after completing his training, Putin was officially commissioned as a major in the KGB's first chief directorate and was sent abroad. His destination was the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, the Soviet Union's most important ally in Eastern Europe, a country on the eve of a storm. For Putin, this was a post fraught with both risk and opportunity. His base of operations in East Germany was not Berlin, the heart of intense intelligence clashes, but Dresden, then East Germany's third-largest city and the capital of the southern state of Saxony. In Dresden, his public cover was director of the Soviet East German House of Friendship. His actual mission, however, was that of a typical KGB foreign agent. During his time in East Germany, Putin had three main tasks. First, to recruit informants at Dresden's universities. Second, to gather political intelligence on NATO activities and the political situation in West Germany. And third, to maintain daily contact and cooperation with the East German Stasi. Putin did his job quite well. By the time his tour was ending, he had been promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel. But then, the unthinkable happened. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down dramatically during an accidental press conference. The collapse of this iconic symbol of the Cold War's Iron Curtain instantly ignited all of East Germany. The East German government crumbled overnight, and its secret services, including the Stasi, scattered to the winds. After the government's collapse, exhilarated East German citizens began storming the buildings of intelligence and surveillance agencies to declare their victory. On December 5, 1989, a crowd in Dresden broke into the local Stasi headquarters, seizing documents and gathering evidence of its crimes. After ransacking the Stasi building, they turned their attention to the KGB residence just a few streets away. In their eyes, the KGB and the Stasi were two peas in a pod, or rather, the KGB was the Stasi's big brother, and they intended to expose it as well. At that critical moment, Putin acted decisively. He stood alone before the crowd, and in his capacity as a Soviet military officer, said in fluent, calm, and firm German,
This building is the property of the Soviet Army and is under armed protection. According to our regulations, our guards have the right to open fire in the event of any trespass. Putin's composure averted a violent confrontation that could have led to bloodshed and bought him an opportunity. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the KGB's operations in East Germany no longer had a foundation. In early 1990, after completing all the wrap-up work, Putin returned with his family to Leningrad. The KGB, though preoccupied with the turmoil of the Soviet Union's final days, took note of Putin, this responsible agent who had just coolly handled a crisis. They gave him two choices. First, he could go to KGB headquarters in Moscow for a desk job. Second, he could enter the KGB's active reserve, which would allow him to retain his officer rank and salary while working in a civilian institution. For Putin at the time, the headquarters had its appeal, but moving to chaotic Moscow was a risk that outweighed the reward, both for his career and his family. So he chose the second option. The KGB ultimately assigned him to his alma mater, Leningrad State University, as an assistant to the rector for international affairs. No one could have predicted that this seemingly mundane choice would become another turning point in Putin's life. The opportunity came through his professor, Anatoly Sobchak. After the tumultuous reforms of the 1980s, the eloquent Sobchak was no longer just a university professor spouting theories to students. In the 1989 elections, he won a seat as a people's deputy for Leningrad by a wide margin, becoming one of the brightest political stars in the entire Soviet Union. He was about to use this opportunity to build his own political team. The next part of the story will begin with Sobchak.